Today's episode is brought to you by Squarespace. This is a real candle, and yes indeed today is Valentine's Day, so happy Valentine's Day. Have fun with your partner, have fun with your fancy dinners and your chocolates and your red roses and whatnot. But for all you single ones out there, don't despair, because today we're going to talk about one of the key symptoms of love that you might have to overcome before you love again next time. Now, personally, I've been through my fair share of heartbreaks, and yes, as we're recording this video, I am currently single and I'm not particularly in a rush to look for anybody. But from what I've gathered, love is the greatest paradox of all. It's capable of sending you into such heights, and it's also capable of descending you into some really low lows. So before I start theorizing about love today on this episode, here's a fair warning by one of my favorite short story writers of all time, Anton Chekhov. If we start theorizing about love, we must have a nobler, more meaningful starting point than mere happiness or unhappiness. Therefore, today we're not going to tackle the happiness of love, nor the despair of love, but we're going to tackle something that occurs when you're actually in love, which is something that accompanies love all the time: anxiety. When we start thinking about the anxiety of love, it's actually quite an interesting phenomenon. Some might even claim that the thrill of love comes from this anxiety that you experience when you're in love. Because if you're certain about it, there's no more mystery. There's no more tension, and there's no more of that play between two individuals. Whereas in the beginning stages of love, sometimes you're not even sure if the other person's in love with you or not. Or sometimes you're not even sure if you're in love with the other person. The space of uncertainty is what's capable of sending us into the greatest delights and descend us down to the greatest lows. And by confronting this uncertainty is the step in the right direction when we want to adequately understand this anxiety. Let's return to one of the earlier points. People who haven't done much loving themselves, they are actually the greatest boasters of love. Just bring to mind that friend of yours who's always fantasizing about love, who's always thinking about it, who's always trying to figure it out, who's always concocting great theories of love. But if you push them a little harder and ask them, for example, how many relationships have you actually been in? Most of the time, not a lot. To explain this paradox, let's turn our attention to one of the longest plays ever authored by William Shakespeare, Hamlet. In the opening scene, the scholarly Horatio was pressed by Marcellus to speak to the ghost of Hamlet's father. "Peace, break thee off. Look, where it comes again, in the same figure, like the king that's dead. Thou art a scholar. Speak to her, Horatio. Looks not like the king. Mark it, Horatio." The term scholar here refers to someone who's really good at theorizing, or really good at coming up with theories about life or about phenomena. In the case of Horatio, because of the guards were quite scared of this ghost-looking thing, and they weren't sure who this ghost is, and they weren't sure if the ghost is going to kill him, their immediate impulse is to bring in a scholar to explain this strange thing that has just happened. In most cases, ghosts are not scary because they present some immediate threat. It's not like they're going to bite your head off in the first scene. Thrillers and scary movies, they kind of bank on this entire idea of spectrality, or this entire idea of uncertainty. So in a very well done thriller movie, the entire movie is supposed to keep the audience in suspense. It's supposed to keep you waiting. In the case of Hamlet, Bernardo and Marcellus, they're asking Horatio to do the impossible, of marking down a ghost. And even though Horatio is a scholar, he's quite out of his depth, because there has never been a scholar who does not believe in sharp distinction between the real and the unreal, the actual and the inactual, the living and the non-living, being and non-being. Hence, the scholarly impulse is quite incapable of marking something as ethereal as ghosts down, because they're so attached to their little categories. Ghosts should be this way, should be that way, but the reality of the ghost is that we don't know how it behaves. That's why it scares us so much. Hence, people who theorize a lot about love without being in love are the great scholars of love, in that they're quite out of their depth when they're trying to conceptualize something as ethereal as love. They desperately want to believe that there are clear answers to love, there are clear ways of loving, and there are clear steps towards finding that perfect person. In an act of possible retreat, they resort to rom-coms, they resort to fictional characters, and they resort to advice on the internet because they're so afraid of confronting whatever this is in real life, while the real lovers of life are too busy putting themselves out there and actually doing the part of loving. Another really interesting question that we have to ask ourselves is why fear? Why are we afraid of love? Or why are these great scholars of love so afraid of actually doing the loving bit? To understand this, let us return to Hamlet once again. In Hamlet, the ghost presents itself as both real and unreal. It's real enough to unsettle the guards, but it's also unreal because, well, Hamlet's father is very much dead. So your potential lover, or that person that you've just been on a date with, occupies a similar status as the specter or the ghost, in that they're both real and unreal. They're real because you've just been on a date with them, but also they're unreal because you don't know this person enough to know the ins and outs of this person, and because they leave you certain impressions after the date for you to ruminate on. Anxiety then arises out of this rumination when the lover's no longer with you. We no longer have any certainty after the date. All we have are memories, impressions, little quotes here and there, or little snippets from the date. And the immediate impulse, if you don't know the other person very well, is to jump to conclusions because you're so anxious about pinning down this exact person, pinning down this idea of the lover, or pinning down what this person's supposed to be like. So instead of actually getting to know the person, you subscribe to a fantasy version of the person when you're in a room alone. In that sense, we're right back to square one, being great scholars of love, because we're so apt at conjuring up theories and concepts and conjuring up explanations for certain things, like they've missed a call from you, or they haven't read your text, or they didn't laugh at the funny meme that you sent them on Instagram. Wild speculations start to bubble up in your head. I think they hate me. I think they're no longer in love with me. I think that date was a fail. But if you take a step back, you'd realize that these speculations have no truth value whatsoever. You don't know what the other person's thinking if they're not in the same room with you. We're all being Horatios. We're trying to mark down something that's no longer with us. When we start thinking in this way, we are really out of our depth in the act of loving, because we are trying to find clear solutions to something that is supposed to be ambiguous. Towards the end of the Second World War, French-Jewish philosopher Emmanuel Levinas arrived at a crucial discovery after a day of laboring at a concentration camp. During his confinement, Levinas was stripped of human skin, as he described it, but right before the total collapse of his humanity, a little dog came up to him and treated him with enthusiasm, which restored the decency of being a human. This major discovery might have saved the philosopher's life, and it led him to conclude that the notion of the other was not a secondary aspect of being human. Subjectivity is rather established on this encounter. For Levinas, we don't actually exist in the world as human beings, as thinking brains, as separate individuals, or, cogito. But instead, your very identity is based on your association with other people, with your relationship with other people, and with how you treat other people and how other people treat you. We are products of who we hang out with, and we're the products of our relationships with the other. And now let's apply Levinas's amazing insight to love. Now, from personal experience, and probably from your experience too, when you go on a first date, man, that anxiety is something else. You're the most anxious when you're waiting for the person to show up, because in your brain you're conjuring up all kinds of things. Is this going to be the right person? Am I going to like him in person? Are we going to vibe in real life? Yada, 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 yada. And by submitting to this anxiety, we are seduced by what could happen, but not what will happen. We're lost in a game of guesses, of speculations, of everything that could go wrong or everything that could go right, without actually confronting the fact that we might just not know anything about this date that's about to happen. It is as if overnight, the nervous lover has transformed himself into a philosopher, quietly contemplating love at a table where there's no lover. But here's the interesting part. When the day does show up, all your speculations tend to collapse into the present moment. You're immediately going to know what the energy's like, what the interaction's like, what the banters are going to be like. So all your speculations go out of the window. All the anxiety go out of the window. And of course, you could still be anxious, but this anxiety is no longer going to be based on speculations. It's going to be based on the moment-to-moment experience that you're going to have with this person. Just like Levinas meeting a little dog at a concentration camp, when you meet your lover, how you think about the whole situation will change entirely. And what you think of the person before the date will ultimately collapse. And here's the real chance for you to get to know another human being from scratch. And when we allow ourselves to cast aside all these meaningless speculations and all of these anxious spells, that's when we're actually confronting a date as what it's supposed to be. An opportunity to have fun and to see where it goes. Because when we refuse to see where it might go, we're forcing a conclusion or forcing an ending to our story that doesn't really belong to us in the first place. Whereas a real understanding of the other person can only unfold when you let go of the string, when you let go of what's supposed to happen, and when you let go of that scholarly desire to pin things down and to just let the date unfold, and also have the courage enough to deal with the outcome or the uncertain outcome, because that is the thrill of romance, that is the thrill of love, and that is how you can resolve your anxiety of love. Thank you for watching today's video, I say, and before I let you go here, today's video is in part brought to you by our sponsor, Squarespace. And in short, Squarespace is a very powerful online platform which allows you to design your dream online store or a website. I personally use Squarespace to design my own website, which you can check out down below, because they feature some of the most beautiful templates I've ever seen. And if you're already to starting an online business or a website or a little blog that you want to run, make sure to utilize Squarespace's latest feature, which allows you to build an audience base through gated member-only content. And through these content, alongside email newsletters and email communication with your fan base, it's going to turn your idea for an online business into reality. And alongside many powerful blogging tools and extensions offered by Squarespace, it's basically an all-in-one platform for you to build a solid community around this big idea that you have. Go to squarespace.com/rcwalden for 10% off of your subscription when you're ready to launch your website or when you're ready to purchase a domain name. Thank you, Squarespace, for making today's video essay possible, and thank you for watching today's episode. Take care and goodbye.